We're going to just look at the long course athlete, the Ironman, the half Ironman. We're going to compare their run form to short course, USAT, circuit runners who are Olympic hopefuls, and we're just going to look at the differences between their run form. And we can see, and you're going to see definite differences between the two. Generally what we'll find is there's probably a little bit more fatigue, if not a lot more, in an Ironman circuit after biking 112. So we want to look at maybe these long course athletes having better run form and a set parameters and a system to follow, a checklist maybe to improve their run form, because they're not hauling 10K like these guys are hauling over the course of a marathon. So if we just go back and we're just going to pick these runners apart as they come through, you're going to see big differences between the Olympic runners and this USAT circuit versus the long course Ironman professionals. So as this guy pushes off, you're going to see huge differences between this and his counterpart with the long course athlete. Watch him push off and look at how far he's going per step. That's a huge step length. And he's not overstriding as much as most people think. If we go just to the center of his ankle joint, that's a huge distance he traveled for one step. Think about it as if you're a triathlete in the pool and you're just chopping away at the water. You're not going very far. You want to maximize how far you're going every step, but you want to do so without overstriding. So if we just take a quick look and show you what the ground force is doing to him, he's got a nice vertical shin, so that ground force is really going to just be driving upwards. What you'll find with most athletes is they get this kind of backwards drive from the ground because they overstride, and they do this. And we'll show you the elite athletes in the Ironman course and how they're overstriding a lot, and that's most likely slowing them down and making them less efficient. So we see this guy come through, a huge step length. When he pushed off, he carried a tremendous amount of distance in that step, and you're going to see him come through again as he pushes off and goes a really far distance per step. So he's really maximizing, but you'll find as most athletes put their foot to the ground too soon. So if we come through and we watch the next guy coming in, same thing you're going to see. Here he comes in contact with the ground, nice mid-foot strike. This is always what we're looking for. If we drop a plumb line right down the center, look at how close he is to his center of mass. We can come in and we can look at his knee angle and look at his actual center line, which is 156 degrees. I mean, no one gets down there. And what we'll see is when we go to those long course athletes, they're up above 170. So what he's really doing by having this nice bent knee is he's maximizing his shock absorption. His glutes are going to turn on, his quad's going to turn on, his calf's going to turn on. He has a nice bent knee when he lands, and you don't see this with non-elite athletes. And then we're going to watch him push off. You can watch how far he just travels in this step. Huge amount of distance traveled without an overstride. So don't think of you have to reach as far, but you need to travel forward. You need to get as far as you can this way with every step that you take. And step length and overstriding are different words. He's not overstriding. Look at how his foot is pretty much, this is a fantastic run for him. He's almost dead underneath his body, and he's not overstriding to get there. He had a huge step length without overstriding. So another great runner coming through. This is number 2 in the race. If we watch the next guy coming through, you're going to see similar things. We're just going to stop after this one. Look at how bent his knee is. This is where he's landing. He's landing perfectly underneath the center of mass. Remember this line, how it's pushing straight up. Because when we go and we look at the next couple of runners, you're going to see a line that mimics this type of motion. And it's really going to just slow them down completely. So we have him come through and push off. That huge step length and being able to travel as far as he can forward really comes from looking at this bent leg. So we see him here. That bent leg is from driving his knee forward, and watch how much hip flexion he gets as he drives that knee forward. That's where all his distance comes from. So we'll see so many runners that don't have, if we take that from vertical, they don't have any knee drive, and that's what makes them gives them the inability to really travel the maximum distance. Remember, we always want to travel as far as we can for every step we can take without overstriding. He's barely overstriding. So this is a great runner. Those last 3 are really good. So here we're going to see Andy Potts, who was the 2012 winner of Ironman Lake Placid, and we're going to see him coming down the hill, which is going to change his form a little bit. But when he flattens out, we're going to see different variables. He's on his second loop. He's tired. I mean, he's finishing his last 13 miles of an Ironman, but we're going to see differences in run form when we look at the Olympic hopefuls and the short course racing. And then we look at Andy as he gets off and runs in a draft-free race, and he really has to rely on a lot of efficiency in his run form. Andy would benefit from having some drills in instruction on how to improve his form and having a checklist to go to so he can maintain his efficiency in the presence of fatigue, because he's reaching out, he's pawing with that leg, and he's actually causing a braking force. So as he comes in contact, you're going to see the same thing on the opposite side. Pushes off really good, so all this push off force, ideally we would like it to carry us as far as we can that way, but we're going to see Andy take that leg, straighten it out, and land with the foot out in front. Now remember, we saw those other guys at 153 degrees. We see Andy hovering up at 163. 10 degrees makes a huge difference. These other guys were hovering right down here at 153, 154. And there's a huge difference between that, because that depicts what the ground's doing to our body. So here we see Andy, his ground reaction force is doing that. If we look at the orientation of the arrow, it is driving him backwards, where the ground reaction force here would just be straight up. And it would really make it more efficient to just take that back leg and push up and over the top. So it gives us the benefit to look at, in the presence of fatigue, what are we doing, how are we falling apart, and how do we prevent that from happening? It's the same thing with any swimmer. I mean, when they start to swim longer, their form falls apart, but they go through checklists, they start thinking of things to make sure that they're doing. Running's no different. We want to make sure that that's happening. Same thing again, we go into that posture, we reach out to the front. If I were to ever design a machine that had its contact point way behind its center of mass, I wouldn't make a lot of money, because that machine is going to tip over and fall backwards every single time. So we're actually fighting our body's natural ability to move forward. We think about when we run, we can either run uphill or downhill. We can run into the wind or with the wind, but and those are factors that we can't control. But what we can do is we can control what the ground's doing to us. By our foot placement, we can stop the ground from trying to slow us down. So he's going to get a ground reaction force driving him backwards here, versus if we got him to land nice in midfoot, the ground's not driving him backwards anymore. It's just driving him up, which gives him the ability to take the force and apply it to his next step, rather than just tapping the brakes, which is what we see with most runners. This is a really helpful shot. It puts us having a professional triathlete next to an age grouper, obviously a fantastic age grouper, but we look at the efficiency of the run and what separates these two over the long haul. We're going to see some stark differences. So we'll come back and we'll just kind of watch them as they come by the camera. We're going to see heel strikes on both sides. Both would benefit from efficiency and forming some sort of checklist to prevent this from happening. But as he comes in contact with the ground, we're going to see, like I said, very big differences in what the leg's doing as they're coming in contact. So they're almost synced up here. So we talked about it before, as they're coming in contact with the ground, they're both going to be getting this big ground reaction force driving them backwards. Both are purposely slowing themselves down due to their run form. But what we see is the professionals watch that leg fly up in the air, and we're looking at the leg that's off the ground. He's actually, by bending that knee, gives him a shorter lever arm to swing that leg through, much more efficient. And the reason that's happening is because he's got a better knee drive than this back runner. Look at how low swinging this foot is over here. Being that foot's so low swinging, it's kind of that shuffling marathon gait that we see. It takes a lot of energy to swing that leg through. It's like swinging a 10-foot pole at a fastball. Really inefficient, tough to do. So what we want to do is we want to just notice the differences between these. They're both overstriding, but we look at the professional runner, or the professional triathlete rather, he gets a good push off, and by getting that knee drive, he's really maximizing his ability to run forward. So we look at the other guy, there's that what we call the Air Jordan pose from Nike. He's going up for the dunk, and his run form needs a lot of work to make himself more efficient. So many triathletes just spend so much efficiency work in the water, but they don't do it on land as well. This is another fantastic example of a very strong runner who runs really well. And we see common traits amongst all these runners is that they all have this nice bicycle pedal stroke. As they push off, they drive their knee forward and have a lot of hip flexion. So if we would just kind of take a quick range of motion measurement for her, she gets that knee out in front, which is really good. But what we'll see is that foot reaches. Instead of taking that foot and putting it to the ground here, we get that little bit of knee extension, which causes her to reach out in front and drive herself backwards, purposely slowing herself down, and would really benefit from working on this. But we watch her come through, you get that leg to bend, it breaks the horizontal, which is really good, and she gets that knee drive. The only thing we would want to fix, again, with this runner, and we compare them to the Olympic runners, is that we want to put that foot to the ground as soon as possible, because it really just decreases the forces that are acting against you. If you want to run a certain race and you want to run as fast as possible, You can try harder to run faster, or you can slow down the forces or decrease the forces rather that are acting against you. So it'd be nice if we could try harder, but generally in a race, people are trying at their given effort that they're supposed to be, whether it's maximal or submaximal. So the only thing that really you can control to go faster for a given effort is those forces that are trying to slow you down.